Good afternoon, everybody. It's about 3:30, so we're going to begin here. First, I want to introduce myself and let you know what this is going to be about today. I'm Rick Logue. I work with the diocese. I work with the elementary curriculum instruction and assessment pieces here. And so what this is the beginning of a three-part webinar series. We have a couple of goals today. This really is meant to be a kind of a basic level, kind of an introductory level. Taking a look at this, what is standards-based assessment, talk about what it is and how it's different from traditional assessment, and some of the advantages. Now, again, it's meant to be an introduction to a beginning point. There are two other webinars that are coming up. The one next week is actually going to talk about some of the real common questions that I hear when we start working with something like this. It's going to deal with things such as motivation with students, homework, how to grade things. Actually, a lot more of the how-to will be in the third week. So this is meant to be all three together. So if you signed up for all three, excellent. If you haven't, I encourage you to sign up for the other two. So we'll begin here and talk a little bit about what's going on here. So what we really need to do is really begin with what is the purpose of assessment and what should be the purpose. Now, I ask this quite often. Whenever I'm in a school, I ask this first question: what is the purpose? I almost always get a couple of answers. The first one is one I get quite often is sorting. No one ever really calls it sorting, but that's what it is. Teachers mention they want to see where kids are in relationship to other kids, or they say that that they want to know if a kid is, one kid is doing better, where they rank, as a student, exceeding the standard at a high level, a low level. They're looking at sorting. Now, sorting is not always bad. We can work with that a little bit, and we can use that to differentiate our instruction. But when the main purpose of it is to sort, that kind of leaves us a little bit behind here. Another big reason I often get is motivation. The kids won't do the work if I do not assign a grade. I will agree with you. Letter grades motivate many students. The goal of earning an A or not getting an F is often enough to help students study. Goals like that, though, do not help students develop an interest in the subject, one that helps them to continue on learning, to go beyond the test or the quiz that they have. It won't help them to either memorize or actually use what they've learned. Yeah, they do motivate. One of my favorite books is Daniel Pink's Drive, and he points out some things in talking about motivation. Some of the worries of using that, basically a carrot and a stick tactic is what he calls it. He points out that it does help people to be motivated, but it really is only short term. It doesn't work well long term, and it doesn't long term. It actually eliminates a bit of the motivation, makes people do a little bit worse. There's a wonderful YouTube video out there from a TED Talk that he does, and he explains this very well. But the carrot and stick approach helps students short term, but when we look at it, and I'd encourage you to take a look at your school's mission statement. Quite often a mission statement includes something along the lines of lifelong learners. And so our goal is to actually encourage this over and over and over. So ultimately, if we're using letter grades or things like that to motivate students, we're really missing out on creating a high-impact learning experience. It's one thing, if you've ever been in a group of people that want to get a good grade, it's really kind of neat. They work together, they learn all this stuff, and then take the test, do a good job, and then go on. Have you ever worked with people that are learning something just to learn something? When I think of this, I think of a good friend of mine who's in a band. This band has no chance of ever playing on a Friday night in front of a whole bunch of people. Never. But he practices every single day. He works at it. Why? Because it's something he really enjoys. These examples here that example is an example of being able to learn without letter grades. So motivation, it does help. But students are motivated to get a good grade, not to learn. And we'll talk more about that next week. That quote there at the bottom from Neil deGrasse Tyson, that is one of the things I point out quite often. Students cheat. They don't cheat. They often cheat because they're more worried about a grade than they are with learning. So that's why I put that there. So the other thing I often get is, what we have to use letter grades, because high schools use letter grades, or we have to use letter grades because colleges use letter grades. We can't ignore that. We can't ignore that. Quite often people say, educators in elementary school, their goal is to prepare students for high school, and high school say their goal is to prepare students for college. It comes in a lot of different ways. One idea is that students need to experience letter grades so that they're actually prepared for letter grades in the future. Another angle is that students without grades are at some sort of disadvantage. So the idea of saying the purpose of doing the grades is that we want to prepare the students doesn't really cut it all the time. Take a look. Think of when you were in college. Now, in most cases, I'm sure somebody's got an exception out there, but in most cases, college classes typically have far fewer grades than a high school or a middle school class. Actually, it's very rare for a college class to have more than 10 graded assignments. I know there are exceptions depending on your content area, but there are a large number of classes where grades are solely based on a couple of tests, maybe a major project, a paper, an assignment. So with this in mind, the key to college success for students is that they learn to stay motivated by something other than a letter grade. Because a poor performance early on really can sink you as a college student when you only have 4, 5, maybe 6 grades. So we need to look at it that way. Now, don't think for a second that I'm arguing that we should not have many opportunities for feedback for students. I think we need more and more and more feedback. What I'm talking about is a very specific letter grade, and feedback does not always need to be in the form of a grade. So what should be the purpose of assessment? Really what it should be is to improve both the students' learning and the teachers' teaching. That should be the purpose. It's an ongoing process. It happens all the time. So what makes assessment for learning really effective is how the information is used. So that is really a couple of key points. So the purpose of assessment, how are you currently using it? And then the other thing, how should it be used? The reporting is also a very valid factor. We do need to report out. We do need to have accountability. But it's very important that our reporting out of how a student is doing is accurate. So let's just kind of put this here. Standards-based assessment, what that really does, it reports student proficiency as it relates to specific standards. That's it. We take a look at the standards and say how a student is doing in each individual standard. But when we take a look at that, that's really kind of putting the cart before the horse. Get it? Cart before the horse. So we're kind of doing that because in order to be able to assess students on standards, we first need to be able to teach students on standards. You may laugh at this, but actually just about 2 weeks ago, I had somebody say, well, where did all these codes in the report card come from? So what is a standard? It's a very, very specific learning goal. So what we do is we take these specific goals that we have and we tell the student how they're doing on that specific goal. Let's compare that. Let's compare that to what we valued in the past. In the past, we've often said, and we've never really said these out loud, but when we take a look at this, these are what actually create letter grades. These are what create, in a very traditional setting, the majority of a student's grade. Not how they've done in class, but these different pieces here. For example, that first one, if you get it right after one exposure, you deserve more credit. Think about homework. Homework is meant to be practice. Now, if we count all of the homework, if we count every single homework grade, the students who understand it first get better grades. And then by doing that, that's what shows us what we value. Hard work, effort, determination, the 3 of those. How many times have we worked with a student and said, oh boy, they don't get it, but they try so hard. So let's bump that grade up a little bit. That happens all the time. Timeliness. Do they turn something in on time? Counting off for things being late isn't really taking a look at how a student is doing based on the standards. Instead, what it's looking at is whether or not they can turn things in on time. So, and then 70%, I was just kind of taking a guess out there, a shot in the dark at whatever a failing grade would be, but doing better than that, doing higher than that. Think about this. whatever you think a failing percentage would be, whether it's 70%, 80%, 85%, I don't care. Is that always accurate? For example, let's say we are doing adding one-digit numbers or multiplying one-digit numbers. Would you say that a student is successful if they could only multiply basically 7 out of the 10 one-digit numbers, like 0 through 6? They could not multiply 7, 8, or 9. Would you say that student is meeting the standard? So what we've valued is not always incredibly accurate. Or another example might be, saying the alphabet. Would we say that a student that knows 26% or 70% of the 26 letters in the alphabet, is that a passing score? So that we're kind of taking away, what have we valued in the past, and taking a look at what we're doing here in the future here. So how does standards-based assessment differ? It differs really because we're reporting how a student performs to a standard instead of an overall class. Numbers in operation, not math, but we've got numbers in operation, geometry, probability, all these different smaller pieces so that we can tell a student either where they're successful or where they need a little bit of help. Now, I've done this this piece here a number of times in the past. I debated doing a quiz here and ask you what grade should each of these students get, whether it's this first student over here or this student over here. What do these grades, when we take a look at it in the final grade piece down here at the bottom, what do these grades measure? Do they measure what each of these individual students know? Well, if we take a look at student 1 here, that student is failing the class. If we look at student 2 here, depending on the grading scale you're using, it's either a very low B or a very middle of the range C, depending on that. What should grades measure? When we say that our grades are out there, they're indicators of what a student knows. There is no reason why this student here, who has performed on all the quizzes and all the tests very well, should fail the class. And this student, on the other hand, who has not done as well on each of these individual tests and quizzes, should be saying, you know what, you're getting a B or C, depending where you're at, a B or a C. All these other things. Now, do you think attitude should be a part of the grade? Not a part of the academic grade. That can be reported in other places. It is a very important thing, but not a part of the academic grade. Or should homework be a part of the grade? That causes a lot of controversy, a lot of concerns, and by no means am I saying all homework is bad, but never ever count a homework. I'm not saying that at all. But I really kind of picture this second student here as one of my daughters. One of my daughters struggles in school, but every day when she comes home and she does her homework, I help her with it. I make sure that she gets all of her math done. I make sure that she gets all this done. These 100% are not an indicator of what she knows or what she can do. It's more of an indicator that she has a parent that's willing to sit with her, that's going to help her with her homework. That's what that homework is counting in a piece like this. So when we take a look at this, when we are you giving better grades to students who have more parental support? And if that's the case, is that fair to the student? And that's been one of our main goals also, is that our grading policies, what we're doing, are actually fair. All right, so what I want to do here is talk about some of the advantages here of using a standards-based assessment. Now, assessment really makes it, when you do this, it makes it a part of the course design, not something you throw in at the end. When you throw it in at the end, it's not always matched up to what you taught. When you think about standards-based assessment, you're looking at it, actually, you should be beginning with that. What are the standards you're going to teach, and how are the students going to prove that they know what you've taught? And when you do that, it becomes a big piece of the class. It gives you a little bit. It gives you a clarity of purpose and goals and standards. Like I mentioned, I had a teacher just a bit ago say, you know what, I've never heard of the standards. How do you know what to teach if you don't have that already? If you're not working towards that? So you have a clarity of purpose. What are you going to do? Well, you know what? I have these specific standards. Here's what students are going to learn. It gives you that. It allows students to demonstrate what they know. To demonstrate. Think of the traditional spelling test. Every Friday you've got 10 words that you spell, and you get those words, and well, you get the words on Monday, and chances are you read them 3 times, or you write them 3 times each on Tuesday. You put them in a sentence on Wednesday, and then on Thursday you go home and study. Is that really mastery of spelling, or is it mastery of memorization? When we look at it in a different light, it becomes different. It becomes, are you learning, and by all means students need to know how to spell, but how do you have a student master spelling? Are they using things independently in their writing? Are they spelling things correctly in their writing? Are they able to explain to you the specific rules? Oh, wow, sometimes it's IE, sometimes it's EI. What's the difference between there? Students are able to demonstrate, not just regurgitate, not just tell you what you've asked a question about, but they're able to show you what they know. It also promotes a deeper understanding. Once a student's motivation is to learn instead of to get a good grade, they naturally begin working on things harder. Think of I taught math. A lot of my examples are math, so I apologize if you haven't taught math. But one of the best units that I ever taught, I love teaching it because it mainly, it was hard for the kids. It was a slope-intercept formula. But once they got it, they began to ask for harder and harder questions that involved the slope-intercept formula. Why? Because they had that motivation to learn. Kids naturally want to learn about things, how things work. Look at a 3rd grader doing science. They just want to know why everything's happening. And when we move away from the memorization, when we move away from that, students have a better ability to understand what's going on. Feedback and reflection. This is probably the single most important part. I probably should have put this all the way up here at the very top, but it's probably the most important part. Why? Because students do better when they have specific feedback, but what they do even better when they have time to reflect on their own work, when they have the chance to self-assess. This is a huge key part. As students self-assess, now you'll have to teach them how to do that, but as they self-assess, they begin to internalize this, and it becomes, now we're taking, and it's getting this part up here about the deeper understanding. Can you imagine a day when you come in and you give a writing assignment and the kid doesn't say, what do you think of this? How great would that be? Instead of, what do you think of this? You can say, well, you know how to grade it. What do you think? You can turn it back on them. It involves that feedback and reflection, that ability for them to understand what they're doing. And then finally, the last one, it pays attention to outcome and processes. What happens here? Think of a very, very traditional classroom. Teacher comes in, teaches for, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes, 25, 30 minutes, however long. Students work. They go home with homework with whatever they finish in class. They come back the next day, and the lesson moves on. And this repeats itself over and over and over. One of the key factors of the standards-based assessment is that we're taking a look at assessment data and basically changing our instruction so that we can teach all the students. So this is meant to be really a very quick overview. This is not meant to be everything. But so I want to leave this time here, and I do need to warn you that if you unmute yourself and ask a question, I am recording this for future use. So, but if you have questions, I can definitely answer those now, or if you want to send them in the comments, I will do that also. But so if there are any, I forgot to mention earlier on that email address that you're receiving emails from, and I'll say this while people are typing in questions, that email address that you're receiving emails from, that is kind of an inactive mailbox, so please mail it to me directly. Rick Logue. But so, all right, so I've got a question here, and the question, this is an excellent one. I love this question, is about what percentage is mastery. Again, what I'll point out is I don't think there is one percentage that works for everything. With percentages, that, for example, that example I did earlier with numbers, I think it was adding 2-digit numbers. We would never accept a student that could not add all 1-digit numbers and say, you know, they're means. And I think it differs. And what we really need to worry about is, what you need to think about is, what are you going to accept? What are you going to say? Here is what meeting the standard is. Here's what exceeding the standard is. And make sure that's communicated to the student. It's not a wishy-washy thing. It's a, are you going to accept it? Our general definition, and works for almost everything, is that students are able to do the work independently on their own. I guess that's redundant, but in grade level work independently, and that's meeting the standard. Exceeding the standard is actually being able to do beyond grade level work, apply it in different areas, those sorts of things. So that's the difference there. So that was the one, and I think only question that I received here. So I'm going to wrap it up here and basically say thank you for participating. I hope to see you next week, and if there are any other questions, feel free to let me know. Oh, now there's come in. Okay, I got a couple of questions here, so if you want to stick around, you can, but I've got to read them here. So let's see, are we in the process of having quantifiable or measurable specific goals for each standard? Working on it. Not quite all the way there. Now think about this, and so you don't think I'm a giant slacker. 5th grade language arts has 72 standards. 5th grade language arts. So I'm not a complete slacker, but to have a quantifiable, specific goal for that, for every standard, K through 8, every subject, is a huge, huge undertaking. So working on it, not quite there yet. So that's why I said this is something you need to talk about, to have with your other teachers, people in your building, to make sure it is. All right, next question here. Could you discuss approaches to some of the bigger concepts and evaluating mastery? Yes, actually that is, and actually the exact example of compare and contrast is what I'm looking at for the third one. That gets more complex as the year progresses. And it cut off that when do we, so I don't know the rest of it. But yeah, actually that is planned for the third webinar. How do you do it? So I will specifically use those and hope to see you there. Why do religions stand? Okay, it's a school speak question. They should be specific to each grade level. I'll have to check on that. But that was all right. We don't take homework as a grade, so I'm confused on the example you gave. Well, good. If you're not taking it for a grade, good. Now, keep in mind, I think there is some good homework out there, just not much. So if you've decided not to use it as a grade, excellent. That's a great decision to make. The example I gave here, let me go back to that here, is what happens if, and I don't know what the right slide is, so give me a second here. The example I gave was actually about my being a parent helps boost my child's grade. Not what my student knows, not what my child knows, but it boosts her grade because she is receiving much higher scores on homework than she is on quizzes. If I looked at this student here, the second one here, I would never recommend that the student, they don't know the material. Their grade's being boosted by other things. So that's what I meant there. Yeah, the next question I have there that the diocese says, that's actually a school decision. That has never been said. And so we hear that a lot. And what it is, it's not homework. Okay, and we're talking about a very specific thing. It's not homework that can't be counted for a grade, that shouldn't be counted for a grade. It's more the practice. The idea that as students practice, that should not be a part of the grade. So it's a fine line. It's not that it's not that we said you can't. Like I said, there are sometimes you should, but think about some of the reasons people give homework. Sometimes people give homework, well, because there are parent complaints, right? You don't give enough homework, you're not teaching my kid, it's not hard enough. So we give homework for that. Sometimes we give homework, and I'm just giving the bad example, so just bear with me for a second. Sometimes we give homework because we get angry with the kids. Oh, you're talking? Well, instead of doing problems 1 through 10, now you're doing 1 through 20. Sometimes we give homework, and then I've asked this question a lot, to introduce a new subject, a new topic, a new concept. When we do that, is it really fair to grade the kid, to take homework for a grade, when they have never been taught it? So these are the things, these are the reasons why we say, not all of it should be counted as a grade. And another reason, another one I hear a lot is, I've got so much to cover, I've got so much to teach, I can't teach it all in my class, so I give them homework. Really? It's kind of like that idea to, you're giving the homework to introduce a topic. You're giving kids things they've never seen, they've never worked on, and you're giving them that, and then you're counting that as part of their grade, as what they know. So when you say the diocese says you can't do it, that may be a school decision. I know some schools have, but homework is homework, sorry, I kind of got distracted by a couple more questions coming in. But there is some good homework. So debate what it measures. Is it, if you're given a homework assignment that is to see what a student knows after you've taught it, that's fine as well. Yeah, and things being turned in on time, that's another one that pops up all the time. Real life issue. If you don't turn in things on time, you're in trouble. Why don't kids have trouble in not turning things on time? Don't think of it that way, okay? I am not advocating that students are not punished for not being responsible and turning their things in on time. What I am advocating is that their grade, which is supposed to be an indicator of what they know, I'm advocating that that is not lowered because of it. Punishments can include and all the way up to whatever you decide, whether you're working with older kids and you have them in for detention to finish a homework, whether you have them stay inside, if it's a younger kid, have them in for recess. What's a real punishment with that when students don't turn in things on time? What if you just give them a 0? What do they learn from that? I'll tell you, what they learn is your homework was not worth doing. And it's a tough thing to hear, but when you let them get away with not turning in homework, that it really becomes a they have a choice, and they shouldn't have a choice, right? You should be the one telling them what they can and cannot do. So these are all excellent, wonderful questions. I think I was about to wrap it up a few minutes ago, and I think I got all of them. I am not positive, but if I missed any of them, please, I'll contact you either on my on your own. And so again, what I want to do is I want to just kind of say thank you for participating in this, and I've got I hope to see you next week. Thank you.